Morning, y'all. How's everybody doing today? Johanna, Jamie, and Paige, have y'all successfully accessed MyBore Central and our BLC in the last 3 days?
Yeah, I have been able to do that. It's been a struggle a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, Jamie said it's been a challenge. It's interesting how I don't have an explanation as to why some people have had like no problems accessing and the speed has been fine. And then for others, like 20 minutes to load the page or log in. That I'm not smart enough to understand how the system is working so quickly for some users, but then so slowly the last couple of days for others.
Yeah,
Guess it's just who's
really,
lucky.
yeah, Monday it was really slow. I guess because that's when they launched it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, I'm gonna jump in. I'm gonna start by sharing my screen. We're gonna circle back to some of those numbers that I've been looking at every 2 or 3 weeks, really going back to the end of June, and revisit a couple of those just to see what's happened in terms of inventory, pendings, days on market. And we're now going back far enough in time that I have charted them, because I think once you have enough data points, just kind of reading them off gets hard to digest what's actually happening. So I'm going to share my screen. I am going to read these out loud, but for those that are able to look at it, y'all can see that spreadsheet there. So just a reminder, this is single family homes in Indianapolis. I think it's a decent measure of what's happening in the broader central Indiana market. Going back to June 29th, all the way through today, looking at actives, pendings, how many have closed in the last 30 days? What does that mean about how many days of inventory do we have? And of the houses that are closing, how many days on market did they have? And yeah, boy, the story here is it's alarmingly consistent, which is a little bit of an oxymoron. It's actually not alarming because it's been incredibly consistent. So think back, June 29th is not only is it the prototypical normal end of busy season, so somewhere towards the end of July or end of June, beginning of July is most often when central Indiana market starts to slow down. And that puts us into a unique time in terms of interest rates. So not only are we looking at the time of year where things start to slow down, but this period of time that we're looking at back to the end of June is also the period of time that rates have changed pretty drastically, at least relative to the last decade. These last few months are the fastest rate increases that we've seen. So going back to June 29th here, looking at this first chart, pending deals have gone from 1,933 to 1,401. So there's 1,400 pending deals as of today. Whereas going back to the end of June, there was 1,900 plus. And every 2 or 3 weeks, as I have measured this, it has gone down at a very consistent pace. So the number of pendings has trended down. It's about 500 down from where it was in June. The number of actives has trended up at very much the same pace. It was just shy of 1,300 at the end of June, and it's just over 1,900 now. So what that means is roughly the same number of houses have been listed on a daily basis. So the level of new listings coming onto the market has held at about the same. And it's just that every couple weeks, fewer and fewer of those are pending. Therefore, more and more of those remain active. The pace at which those two numbers have changed, though, over the course of from June to July, from July to August, August to September, September to October, they're really not moving quickly. So yeah, we're down 500 pendings from the end of June to today, but it's a slow and steady decrease that mirrors the slow and steady increase of actives. And you'll remember we talked about in August, it was right at the beginning of August where those two numbers switched. So you see here on this first chart, the orange line and the blue line, orange is active, blue is pending. The fact that in June, July, and for the first week of August, we had more pendings than we did actives, that is the anomaly, right? That is the circumstance that Indianapolis was not at all used to seeing, although it had been our norm for a couple of years. So really through most of the pandemic, this was the scenario where that blue line was higher than the orange line. There were more houses pending than there were active, which makes inventory feel very low, right? So our days of inventory had crept down to like around 20 for a long time. By the end of June, it was at 30, 36, 38, 40, 46, 48, 55. So our days of inventory is increasing as active increases, pendings go down. If you wanted to look at one data point that I think is okay, what's the one that illustrates the rate of change the best? Because you can look at any number of these to try to determine what's the balance like between buyers and sellers and how quickly is it changing. The one that I think illustrates it in one point the most is the average days on market of a house that closes, which is that last data point. It's the orange line on the bottom chart. It's the far right column. So that means of the houses that have closed in the last 30 days. So right now, this morning, when I ran these number, that's over 1,000 houses, single family houses in Indianapolis that have closed in the last 30 days. How many days did those 1,000 houses sit on the market? So going back to June, that was 11, which was, crazy low, right? We crept down into the single digits at one point in early 22. We'd been in the single digits a little bit in 21, which is because of all these houses that are selling in 2 days, right? But in June, we're still at 11, which is very, very low. So it goes from 11 to 13, creeps up to 19 at the end of July, actually goes back down to 15 for most of August, 17 in September, 22 as of today. So those 1,000 houses that have closed in the last 30 days. So this is stuff that likely went pending in August. Okay, you follow that? So stuff that may have listed in July, was on the market for 22 days, went pending in August, ended up closing at some point in September, maybe early October. And that 22 days, I think, is a really good indicator when you're talking with consumers, buyers or sellers, and you're trying to articulate to them how has the market shifted from that kind of like breakneck pace that we had become used to? I think that's actually the best single data point. Is you could say, hey, look, traditionally, if a house sells in less than 30 days, you would consider that a fast, hot seller's market. People would traditionally use those words to describe any market where the average house is selling in less than 30 days. Okay. So that gives a reference point to be able to say our market felt insane because that actually crept down to lower than 10. The average house was essentially selling in 1 week's time. And that's a very hard market for buyers. So now that we're at 21.9, right, you could say to a consumer right now, the average house is selling in 22 days on the market, and relative to 7 or 8, that feels very slow. It causes a seller to say, what's wrong with my house? Why am I not getting multiple offers? Why have I been listed for 2 weekends? But then you zoom out historically and say, but remember, the industry has always viewed 30 as this normal benchmark of what would be considered fast. There's actually, we've talked about it before on this call, 30 is the benchmark for what would be considered fast. If you're looking for what would be the benchmark for a truly balanced market between buyers and sellers, most of the time it's 60. So we're kind of a ways from what would be considered balanced. Now, if Indianapolis ever gets to 60, in terms of average days on market for stuff that's closed in the last 30 days, y'all know how that's going to feel. Like that is going to feel like buyers are just have a heyday and that sellers are desperate and will do anything to sell the house, which is probably not true. But if we ever got back to 60 from where we've been, you know what that's going to feel like, because 22 feels fairly slow. So I think that can be helpful just to think about, okay, seller lists their house. If it's priced appropriately, it should sell in 3 weeks. That's the average, which means there's plenty of houses that are taking 4 or 5 weeks to sell, and they are selling, they're moving. I'm going to keep charting this through the end of the year because I think we're in this really interesting climate where, because of interest rates, I think that narrative of maybe it's fear or maybe negativity, but also just the intrigue or the interest in what's going to happen in the future. Not only are we coming off of those 2 years of 15% year-over-year price increase, which feels unsustainable. You drop into that these last several months of pretty rapidly increasing interest rates. Those two things combined really do put the temperature of what's going to happen in the future at a pretty high level. People really want to know, and it feels like it impacts their decisions. I think this average days on market is a number that I would have in my pocket at all times. Just to be able to, if you're a realtor that just loves data and wants to be able to just rattle off stat after stat after stat, I could see really wanting to track a lot of these numbers or getting really specific, maybe into a part of the region that you do a lot of business in. But if you're not necessarily the person that's going to, want to dive into stats and rattle off a bunch of things, I do think this average cumulative days on market is the number. And just remember, okay, 30 traditionally would be considered fast. We got down into single digits, which means the fact that we're at 22 feels slow. So you can remember those 3 data points. 30 is fast. We got into single digits. We're now at 22, so it feels slow, but historically it would be considered fast. That's the numbers I was going to look at today, and I went through them a little bit quicker than normal. Maybe the charts help, but Comments or questions? I'm always curious as people look at these numbers, does it line up with what you're kind of anecdotally experiencing? In other words, you might say, well, gosh, days on market has tripled, but it still feels really fast to me. Or you might say, okay, Mark's saying it's still moving relatively well. 22 is better than 30, but it feels very slow to me. So what's your just kind of anecdotal experience in the marketplace right now?
It's Natanya. And I've been listening to these as diligently as I can, and they're super helpful. And I actually use the exact data points that you talked about, I think in 3 or 2 meetings ago, about the turn and is it a buyer's or seller's market? And I got 2 new clients, and I was talking to Sarah last night. We were both at the office a little late. And I was like, you're working that baby out. And she goes, we're just busy. And I said, you know what? I'm busy too. And so I think that for me, I'm seeing an uptick the past 2 weeks. And I think part of that is education on my part to my clients and just this information. So thank you.
Yeah, that's good, Natanya.
Have taken them from
I lost you there at the end, but yeah, that's really good. And it's funny how quickly you lose sight of this, but yeah, for the 13 coming up on 14 years that I've been in the business, until 2019, and really even maybe in 2019, but definitely until 2019, there had been this very normal rhythm of, it's going to be busy from March to June. July, take it or leave it, might be busy, might not. August, almost everybody's slow. You'll see a pickup in between Labor Day and Thanksgiving. It'll be slow from Thanksgiving to New Year. And then it'll pick up from New Year to March is where it starts to ramp up. And then it's going to be busy March to June. Like that calendar, that cycle, not only was it consistent in the market, but the majority of realtors that I know experienced a very similar rhythm every year, like in their own individual business. I think 20 and 21 like threw us for a loop in growing accustomed to this. Well, it pretty much always feels busy right now, right? Because if a house lists, it doesn't matter what month it is, you got to go see it right away, and it's going to be multiple offers. So kind of the removal of that seasonal cycle. But 22, I think is going to turn out to be very much like all those other years. And we're right in the middle of what is typically a pickup in activity, right? So if July is where it normally starts to slow down through the start of school, so somewhere first, second week of July to Labor Day is typically a very slow market. From Labor Day to Thanksgiving, it picks back up. Most agents have this little surge of activity. My team and our brokerage as a whole are having that surge of activity. And we're basically halfway from Labor Day to Thanksgiving right now. So no surprise, right? Well, we're just past halfway, I guess. Yeah, and I think that would also mean about a month from now, we'll start to see a slowdown, which will run through New Year's. Doesn't mean everybody's going to be dead, but I personally find that a little bit refreshing, to get back into something that feels like a normal seasonal cycle that is a little bit predictable. It's just that I think this year, that middle of July to Labor Day slowdown caused a lot of anxiety. That's my interpretation.
I would agree with that, Mark. And I think for me personally, being in my second year, it's nice to be able to have these 2 extremes to compare and to know that this is more of the normal, and to be able to try to build my business plan for next year off of that is helpful.
Yeah, that's I really like the way that you said that, Natanya. I kind of just anecdotally, I've had conversations with agents over the last couple of years that have been in the business for a long time, commenting November and December are normally months where they would do a lot of planning and goal setting and brainstorming and lead generation work and client care and just a lot of the stuff that they felt like they'd fallen behind on during busy season. Well, then in 20 and 21, I feel like so many people were saying, I can't, especially 20, like I can't do those things right now. Like I'm running buyers around. I'm trying to get deals closed. So I think that if you had been in the business for a while leading up to 19, most of those agents had gotten used to this rhythm of July and August and November and December are times where I know I'm probably going to have some added margin to do some work on my business. And then the other 8 months of the year, I'm probably going to be having to work in my business a lot more. So yeah, it's a good business planning perspective. I see somebody dropped. Oh, Paige was agreeing with Natanya. Generally a good idea, Paige, to agree with Natanya.
Didn't hear me laughing fast enough.
All right, well, I will let us go. We're just past 9:20. I say it, I try to say it every time. If Rex or I can ever be helpful in trying to evaluate what is happening in our market at large, or in a very specific segment of our market, or in a conversation with a client in regards to what's happening in the market, we'd love to be able to do that. I think it's an area where as a realtor, being very well informed is a true value add service to your client. It's not just something that makes you look good, although it might. I think it does actually help them to make the right decisions. So I don't think you have to be an expert. I think it could be as simple as understanding what's happening with average days on market. So thanks for joining, y'all. Have a great Wednesday.
Thanks, Mark.